And we're ready. Let's go. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our 10th annual Ag Labor Forum, our first in a virtual platform, which is a new and interesting experience for all of us. Yeah, and it seems kind of weird to me too. It's been an interesting morning so far. It's strange that I can't see everybody. It's strange that we can't hear your responses. We can't hear your thunderous applause and your loud laughter and your gasp at some of the information that comes up. But we hope that we're hitting the mark with our comments. I kind of miss running around in the real conferences, seeing everybody, in person, and getting my steps in. That's one of the downsides of this. So I'm not getting my steps in. I'm just sitting here. But I guess it's kind of interesting too. A lot of you are wondering if we're wearing regular pants or pajamas or shorts or who knows what. But anyway, thanks a lot, everybody, for coming out and joining us. We're looking forward to getting your feedback to how this experience is going for you, because more than likely you're going to see more of virtual events in the future. My name, by the way, is Lupe Sandoval. I'm the founder and the executive director for the California Farm Labor Contractors Association since 2009. And want to say thanks. And I hope you folks have already gotten a chance to get to know our staff. Our staff has been tremendous in helping us adjust to this new virtual world in this COVID land that we live in. Some of you have already had the opportunity to meet our program managers. She joined us in May. Kimberly Clark has done a tremendous job in moving us forward with these new forums. Some of you have also met our new, or not so new, we've had her since last year, so last year's model. Jan Whitney is our program, is our developer, let's change that, is our director of development and communication. She's the one that's going to be reminding people about their membership renewals here pretty soon. And they've worked so hard on this thing. They've put in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, a lot of hours, a lot of research, a lot of struggles trying to figure this stuff out. And I think they've done a great job so far. I think so anyway. If for some reason this technology isn't working so well for you, if you're getting frustrated, you can blame them. Just kidding. But please let us know what we're doing well and what we can do in the future to make this a better experience for you all. Also want to thank all of our program moderators who have put in their time, including some of our board members who were very involved with our planning committee for this event: Gonzalo Sapiz, Greg Anderson, Javier Hernandez, Keith Brandt, and Jeff Wenger. Couldn't go forward without the input from our board members. They've been really helpful to us. And we really couldn't have gone anywhere with this at all without all the people that donated their time to present here. We've had a lot of great presentations so far. A lot of people willing to share their expertise, their experience to help make your jobs easier out there. I wish I could have listened to all the presentations, but we have 3 concurrent sessions. Fortunately, we will be able to see these on download. You'll be able to access and view these for the next 30 days. So make sure you take advantage of that opportunity as well. CFLCA, as I mentioned, we've only been around since 2009. That's a pretty new compared to, like, say, the Western growers that Dave Puglia works for, or Farm Bureau. But we're growing. We appreciate and we rely on membership funds. We rely on registration fees, and we really rely a lot too on the fees that we get from our exhibitors, from our sponsors. We wouldn't be able to carry on with this without them. And I hope that you take time to visit these folks. Go to their exhibitor booths. I've been to a couple. It's been an opportunity to say hi to a few folks and to learn about their products and their sources, the resources they can provide to you folks. Oh, and by the way, if you happen to get a chance to visit all of them, you'll get entered into a drawing for some really cool prizes. Hundreds of dollars worth of prizes available for you. Anyway, our sponsors, our exhibitors today, we have several silver sponsors. McKay Grasosco, thanks Erica for all your help today. Adrian Hopp's also extremely helpful to us today. Peter Nissen, Nissen Vineyard Services, thank you. The Prince Law Firm, Lisa Prince, Relation Insurance and their big team over there, and also the UC Davis Western Center for Agricultural Health and Safety. We have several gold sponsors, Aztec Foreign Labor, Karen Schindler and her team, Barsamian and Moody, Pat Moody and all the great folks over there, Bravo Ag Group, OFR, MDM, Freedom Ag, and Mid-Valley Labor Services, thank you, as well as the folks over at Bronco. Data Tech, those experts over there in Ghana's, and DLL Insurance. Stronger Together, thank you. Zenith Insurance has always been there for us as well. And I can't forget about our platinum sponsor, Paramount Exclusive Insurance. We rely on and we really appreciate all these sponsors and all these exhibitors. And again, we hope you'll take a few minutes to go visit with them, say hi, check out and see what they've got for you, how they can help you guys get better out there. Now it's really my pleasure to turn this over to our platinum sponsor. We're really happy that Sean Cohen, the president of Paramount Exclusive Insurance, could be here today to say a few words. I know that Sean is still a little bit upset that he wasn't invited to that birthday dinner along with the Governor Newsom over at the French Laundry, but Sean, you'll get over it. Sean, thanks a lot for your steady support, your generous support to CFLCA, and your contributions to the farm labor contractor and agricultural employer community. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Sean Cohen.
Thank you, Lupe. Good morning or good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Paramount is honored to be a platinum sponsor here today, and in general, a firm supporter of the California Farm Labor Contractor Association. Our sponsorship is an integral part of our dedication and commitment to our clients. As you know, Paramount looks to partner with organizations like CFLCA, whose mission is to empower its members with the resources and educational materials necessary to run a successful operation. In this case, it's a trade that's necessary to feed the entire world. Our trust is built in relationships, and our trust is what builds our business. Paramount is invested in business relationships, and we recognize the importance in our day-to-day performance and how that significantly impacts our clients. We have become a friend and a trusted ally to many in the agricultural industry like yourself. It is apparent that these services we provide to our clients, from competitive insurance rates to our supportive in-house claims team, in addition to the trainings and HR services, we've never been more critical at a time such as now. With constant changes and new requirements being implemented, it seems almost regularly, Paramount understands the challenges the FLCs are facing, and we're proud to be able to partner with this organization to be a primary resource our clients can trust with their insurance needs. Paramount is grateful to all the members and staff in the organization who strive for that common goal, and we will continue to support the CFLCA to any possible extent. I'm now going to introduce Dave Puglia, who is the president and CEO of Western Growers, where he leads publicly policy initiatives and manages a range of legislative and regulatory issues affecting the agricultural industry. He has been at the forefront of major legislative and regulatory issues involving water, energy, air quality, and labor. David Puglia also serves as the vice chair of the Public Policy Institute of California's Water Policy Center Advisory Council, and before joining Western Growers, served for 7 years in the California Attorney General's office, working as a public affairs consultant to numerous corporations and industry groups, and served in senior roles on several statewide political campaigns. Given this tumultuous year, politically and otherwise, we are very excited for his keynote address, The Intersection of Politics and Agriculture. Throughout the presentation, please type your questions into the Q&A feature found on the right side of your screen. The last 10 minutes will be devoted to answering your questions. Please, let's welcome Dave.
Thank you very much, Sean, and thank you, Lupe. Good to see you again. Lupe and I go back to the founding of the association, and like to think that I helped him kind of figure out directionally where to go when he started it, and I think it's been a real success. So it's good to see Lupe again. I think most of us probably would rather the title of this discussion be how to stop the intersection of politics and agriculture. I think most of us would like to be left alone. Certainly for all of you as partners to my members, to the growers and shippers in the Western US who provide fresh produce to the nation and the world, we know we're in it together, and we've been in it together now for a very long time. And it's an unfortunate truth that, especially in California, where politics and agriculture intersect, has been mostly negative. We've had our share of successes, but operating in California as any private employer is a challenge that gets worse year over year. We in agriculture, who rely heavily on natural resources, on land and water and air, and have a special reliance on labor, we're especially targeted, for lack of a better word, I guess, by many of the leaders of our political branches in California. And to some degree, that's been true on the federal level too. Nonetheless, we can't disassociate ourselves from politics and from government. Because we are such a resource reliant industry, and because we are so visible to policymakers, we have to intersect with political thought leaders, with our elected officials, with regulatory agencies, no matter how challenging that might be. Obviously, we just came through an election cycle, and that portends change. I'm going to try and shed some light on what that change might look like across both the federal and the state landscapes, mostly on the federal side, because as I'll discuss in a few minutes, not much is going to change in California probably. But a lot of this is going to be a crystal ball exercise. There's a lot we don't know yet. President Trump believes that he has still won the election, I think, with all the caveats that we could lay down about the president having available to him the courts to be able to pursue his case. I think most of us are probably assuming that we have a President Biden and Vice President Harris on January 20th. And I think we have a relatively good sense now of what the new Congress will look like. And so that gives us a little bit more to work with as we conduct a crystal ball exercise, and we look across some of the issues that are most important to agriculture. And in this audience, of course, labor, both regulatory policy and legislative policy towards our labor supply are paramount importance, and I'll spend most of my time on that. One outcome that could have occurred this year in the presidential and congressional elections, which was predicted by a lot of smart people, was that there would be a blue wave, that not only would President Trump lose, but Republicans would lose the US Senate and would see their margin further decreased in the US House of Representatives. One of those things happened and the other two didn't, at least in the Senate case, not yet, and it still could. But it's very interesting that the blue wave didn't take out more members of the US Senate, Republican members of the Senate, and even more interesting to me that our friend Kevin McCarthy from California not only prevented the loss of seats in his caucus, but actually gained seats. He will probably gain somewhere around 10 or 12 seats when all the votes are finally counted and races are certified, elections are certified. And what that means is the next Speaker of the House, assuming it is again Nancy Pelosi, will have a very, very thin margin in the majority. It will be a single-digit margin, which will be the closest since the teens of the last century, the 1900s, if I'm not mistaken. And so that changes the dynamics considerably, not only for both chambers of Congress, for the House and the Senate, but most importantly for the incoming Biden administration. So I think it's helpful as we look forward now to the next 2 and 4 years. 2 years because there will be another round of elections in 2 years in the House and the Senate, 4 years for the obvious reason. I think it's helpful to look backwards a little bit and think back on what the Trump administration has done, because that helps us understand what needs to be protected, what was not so positive, where maybe we could see some improvement, and things that were just outright negative, where again, we could see some improvement. So running through the major issues, again, in this audience and in my world, certainly representing growers in the Western US, our labor supply is our number one issue. We are still chronically short labor. I'm telling you something you know better than I do. So that continues to be our top priority. The Trump administration, I think it's fair to say, never really figured out where it wanted to go on immigration policy as a legislative matter. The administration did take steps administratively through the regulatory process, but as we know from experience, that tends to amount to nibbling at the edges of a problem and doesn't get to the core response that we've needed from the federal government for over a decade, which is a pathway to legalization in some form or fashion for our existing workers who are here working without proper documents, but obeying our laws, paying taxes, contributing to our economy, contributing to our society. That has been the ice that cannot yet be broken, at least not fully, although we've had some incremental success, both in 2013 when we negotiated a bipartisan ag labor bill that passed the Senate with a healthy bipartisan vote, only to be ignored by the Republican-led House of Representatives, unfortunately. And then again, of course, last year in 2019, with the Farm Workforce Modernization Act passing the House of Representatives with a bipartisan vote, 34 Republicans joining the majority of Democrats to pass it, to then only be ignored by the Senate Republicans. And so we've had our moments of success. We've just never been able yet to close the circle entirely. And that will lead us to a discussion about the incoming Biden administration. I think it is a fair assessment that had the Trump White House been more engaged and more dedicated to resolving at least the agriculture industry's labor problem, not to say comprehensive immigration reform, which would cover all industry sectors and all different aspects of the issue, because that's comprehensive is very tough to do. But the agriculture industry has made its case persuasively to the American people and to policymakers that our labor shortage is one that will only be alleviated by federal legislation that provides both that legal pathway to our existing workforce and an improved H-2A or guest worker program that fulfills our future labor needs, because we know Americans won't take these jobs. We can't really say that about other industry sectors. So we've proven the case. And I think that's why both the Senate in 2013 and the House of Representatives last year were able to pass bipartisan legislation to address our needs. But the fact of the matter is that the Trump White House never did take up the cause and impress upon Senator McConnell, the leader of the Senate, that bipartisan legislation coming out of the House should be taken up in the Senate, should at least be given a hearing, because that would have indicated that the president was likely to sign it if it had made it to his desk. But the internal divisions within the Trump White House on immigration were so strong that they simply couldn't come to any consensus internally as to what they wanted to see the legislative branch put on the president's desk. And that's a shame. Hopefully, the Biden administration coming in, and Joe Biden himself as a longtime member of the US Senate, with 39 years, I believe, served in the Senate, will have a different viewpoint. Will seek to find that center on immigration reform and seek to engage his colleagues in both the House and the Senate to try and produce something. So I'll come back to that in a little bit, but that's a really, really, of course, important question mark about how immigration reform generally, meaning DACA and many other issues, and the agriculture industry's labor shortage more precisely will be woven together and perhaps advanced by the incoming administration. The other major policy issues that we have to look at, I think, that are subject to change, trade policy, certainly. The Biden administration will have a different view than the Trump administration. Again, we don't know to what degree that will manifest in new trade agreements or attempts to revise existing trade agreements like the US, Canada, Mexico trade agreement that replaced NAFTA, which has generally been favorable for our interests, for the Western produce industry interests. But Biden has been explicit as recently as yesterday in stating that any trade negotiations he enters into will include union representatives and representatives from environmental organizations as he crafts U.S. trade policy. That's a distinct break from the Trump administration's posture, and that means different trade policy. And so I think the largest question mark will still be around China, whether Biden will seek to pull back from our commitment to a phase 2 trade agreement with China and instead reset phase 1 to impose perhaps stricter labor and environmental standards on China. Whether China would ever agree to such standards is a whole different discussion. But I think that's where the delta between a Trump and Biden trade policy will probably be most apparent. We are looking very seriously at changes in environmental policy, starting with water supply. We've had some very serious help and success from the Trump administration's Interior Department and US EPA with respect to water policy and other environmental policies. But most of those, virtually all of them, are in the form of regulatory policies or executive orders that are currently in litigation, challenged by mostly environmental groups, by the state of California, by other states as well. And those policies have given a little bit more common sense to the way we operate California's water system, particularly to be able to move water that is excess flood runoff from the Delta to the San Joaquin Valley in Southern California, rather than having to send most of it back out underneath the Golden Gate Bridge and out to sea. We've been able to move a little bit more water for farms and cities than we were able to under the Obama administration. I'm quite concerned that the Biden team will come in and essentially wave the white flag in all of those federal court cases, will withdraw the federal government's position, and we go back to where we were in 2008 through 2016 on water policy. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. We will argue strongly against a rollback of those water policies that have been so helpful to agriculture, but I think it is a serious vulnerability for our industry as the new administration comes into play. And then, of course, tax policy, which affects every business in the United States. There's a real threat that the next Congress will team up with the Biden administration to roll back some or all of the corporate tax cuts that were implemented by the Trump administration in the last Congress. And I think that's just generally harmful to any private enterprise, whether you're in California or agriculture or not. So coming back to immigration reform, because again, that's where I think we have both the greatest need among all of our policy issues, and also perhaps the greatest opportunity across the other ones I just spoke of. As I mentioned, there is, in my own mind, an opportunity for Biden being, at least historically through most of his career, a somewhat moderate Democrat. He was never viewed, or at least for the most part in his career in the Senate, he was not viewed as a progressive. He was viewed as a moderate or centrist Democrat who frequently worked across the aisle with Republicans on major legislation. And if that is, in fact, who he still is, and it's where his instincts take him, I think there's real opportunity. Because as we discussed shortly a while ago, there was no blue wave that swept over the Congress. Both the Senate and the House will be very, very closely divided. The House, as I mentioned, by only single digits. And within the House Democratic caucus, there's an interesting potential divide that would further enhance the influence of the Republican caucus. Specifically, the progressives within the Democratic caucus are fighting sort of a rear guard action to keep their moderate Democratic friends from holding sway over the positioning of the Democratic House caucus on policy issues. The election results strongly suggest to most people that Democrats lost seats in the House because they didn't support the police in cities where there has been violence, that they embrace left-wing economic policy. Trump and others called them socialists. That punch seems to have landed, and a number of other issues where progressives look to have painted themselves into a corner and lost a lot of votes in the middle in key districts in key states. And if that's true, the moderate Democrats in the House of Representatives will have some success pushing the progressives back a bit. That would work potentially to the benefit of a President Biden administration if he and his team seek bipartisan consensus on immigration reform. That would give them more flexibility within the Democratic caucus to, for example, push for incrementalism on the ag workforce. And what I mean by that, just hypothetically, where the progressive wing of the Democratic caucus will insist on having a pathway to citizenship, or there will be no legislation at all, the moderate wing might agree, as they did last year with the Farm Workforce Modernization Act, to a pathway to legalization for the ag workforce that's here. Those are two different things. A Biden White House that signals strongly to their own party within both the House and Senate that they prefer a deal that resolves ag's immigration and labor problem as a way to then perhaps break the ice with the rest of the immigration reform puzzle that's been sitting out there. A path to legalization may be the preferable path for both moderates in the House and for the Biden administration in that scenario where you want to get something done. It's positive. It may not be everything that everybody wants, which is always going to be the case with immigration reform. None of us will ever get everything we want. But that dynamic with the rising sense of more centrist Democrats, or at least less progressive Democrats in the House, could be helpful to us. The same is true to a degree in the Senate. The Senate has two runoff elections coming in Georgia, as I think everybody knows. Those will be decided in early January. I believe it's January 5th. Even if the Democrats were to win both of those Georgia Senate seats and thus hold 50 seats in the Senate with the ability to break a tie, a 50-50 tie, because the vice president breaks ties in the Senate, and that would be Vice President Kamala Harris. Nonetheless, you look already at some of the key Democratic senators who are more in the center, and they are, like the moderates in the House Democratic caucus, being pretty loud about their dissatisfaction with what the progressive wing of the party did to their ranks in both the House and the Senate this year. Democrats thought they were going to take the Senate. They may, but if they do, it will be by the slimmest of margins, using the vice president to break ties. Joe Manchin, who is a longtime Democratic senator from West Virginia, last week very publicly called out Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a member of the House of Representatives and a leading progressive, the so-called squad that she leads of progressives, called her out very publicly for costing Democrats seats and refusing to go along with the progressive agenda. So the point of all of that is, because immigration reform, whether it's ag labor or a broader immigration reform, has to have bipartisan support or it will not make it through both houses. I think that even if the Senate, is divided 50-50, the conditions for a bipartisan ag labor bill are probably pretty strong, and maybe stronger in that scenario, or certainly if it's a 51-49 split with Republicans. Now, I think there are some issues within the ag labor space that can greatly complicate this optimistic picture that I'm painting for you. Namely this: we know that the Trump administration recently issued a proposed rule that changes the H-2A wage formulation essentially freezes the 2019 wage in place, and we view that positively, of course. But not everybody views that positively. The United Farm Workers, other advocates for labor have their guns set on that rule. They are already in court challenging the Trump administration's previous rules on H-2A. And so I think that to the degree that a Biden administration goes aggressively after that wage rule, but also goes aggressively at other changes through the regulatory arena, namely overtime for ag workers nationwide. We have that in California, as you know. We're phasing that in at a great cost, unfortunately, to both worker earnings and farm bottom lines. But Washington State has now instituted ag overtime through a state Supreme Court ruling there. Other states have legislatively instituted ag overtime, and most importantly, United Farm Workers Union has pushed for a national overtime standard for farm workers. They've also pushed for a rollback on the worker protection standard that the Trump administration rolled back from the Obama years, which was very helpful to us. And of course, the Trump administration generally made H-2A work a little bit better than it had worked under the Obama administration, with some streamlining of process and the like. The United Farm Workers Union is no fan of the H-2A program. We've seen in the California legislature there are multiple attempts, some successful, some less successful, to handicap the H-2A program's utilization in California. Their advocacy with a Biden administration could complicate our efforts to form a consensus for a bipartisan legislative solution on ag labor. And because the UFW sits on the Biden transition team, that gives us even greater concern. So that, I think, gives us reason to be both optimistic in the large sense when it comes to immigration, even though we know how hard it is to get anything done. We have to be optimistic. We have to push that rock up the hill. But I think we also have to be worried about tangential or secondary issues that United Farm Workers and other advocates will pursue with the Biden team that will cause rancor and partisan division within the Congress that would make a larger immigration bill that much harder to pass. A quick word on the outcome of elections in California. First, for anyone who owns commercial property, we defeated Prop 15, thankfully. The ag industry played a large role in that. We in California Farm Bureau Federation and Ag Council of California partnered to raise a few million dollars to communicate directly to rural voters about the danger of that measure, and we succeeded. So some good news there. But less helpfully, in the legislature, the supermajorities held by the Democratic Party in both houses of the legislature will remain the same in the case of the Assembly and actually grow in the case of the state Senate. And so the difficulty there is that prior to this election, Democrats had a 2/3+2 supermajority in the Senate. And what that meant for us is that we could persuade perhaps a senator like Steve Glazer from the East Bay, who's been a very centrist Democrat and very responsive to agriculture. If we could persuade Glazer to stay with us on legislation that required a 2/3 vote, we would need him to also go recruit 2 members of his caucus to stick with him. Now, because Republicans will lose at least 2 of their remaining seats in the Senate, Glazer will have to not only hold tight himself, but he'll have to go find 4 other Democratic senators to stick with him to stop a 2/3 bill. That's a very tall order, and puts us even more reliant on the governor to veto bad legislation. They could override it. They certainly have the numbers, but so far Democrats in the legislature have been reluctant to even talk about overriding the governor of their own party on a veto. So the hill has just gotten steeper in Sacramento. And I think that's going to be our lot in life for the time being. We hope to see some rebalancing in the legislature, but it didn't happen in this cycle. And so we'll have to start looking at the next cycle to at least introduce more moderates to the legislature to join people like Steve Glazer and Adam Gray in the assembly. So with that, I've kind of run the gamut and used up quite a chunk of time, and I don't want to stretch it so far that there won't be time for questions. I'd love to answer any that you have. I appreciate your time and attention, and appreciate the invitation to be with you today.
Thank you so much, Dave. We do have a question here. Please, our audience, thank you for joining us. Be sure to submit your questions for Dave in that Q&A feature as we move forward. So the first question we have from an attendee, Anonymous, was how confident are you that the immigration needs we are facing can have success in the Senate for approval?
Well, you know, I'm a relentless optimist. And it's probably stupid given experience. Experience probably ought to tell me to be a pessimist. But I'll tell you why I'm optimistic. As tough as the Republicans in the Senate had it this year, because they had so many vulnerable members of their caucus up for tough re-election fights, and the Democrats had very few, and the Republicans performed very well, as I mentioned earlier. You look at 2022, and Senate Republicans have, again, more of their own members up for re-election, and some of them come from very purple states. And arguably, those incumbent Republican senators in purple states looking at tough re-elections in 2022 might welcome a bipartisan immigration bill for agriculture, or a broader one, maybe combining with DACA legislation, to improve their chances in states that are very moderate, where Republicans don't have a strong majority. For example, Pennsylvania, Senator Toomey, that is a very purple state. North Carolina, Senator Burr. Georgia, if Senator Loeffler survives her runoff in January, she has to run again in 2 years. Marco Rubio in Florida is running in 2 years. A number of others, Ron Johnson in Wisconsin. These are all Republicans in very purple states, maybe less so in Florida in the case of Rubio, but all of them are going to be challenged, seriously challenged by probably good Democratic candidates. And if they can apply some pressure on Leader McConnell to move a bipartisan bill that at least resolves agriculture's problem and maybe combine it with DACA, that's good positioning for all of them to be in the center in states where the center is the strongest.
Thanks, Dave. It looks like we've either overwhelmed the audience with all the information you shared, or Lupe? Sorry, go ahead, Lupe.
Dave, as you're aware, with Kamala Harris moving likely into the vice presidency role, that opens up the Senate seat here in California that Governor Newsom will appoint. There seems to be a lot of pressure on him to appoint a person of color, perhaps a female, perhaps a Latino. I'm seeing a lot of Latino names like Alex Padilla and our Attorney General, Javier Becerra, being touted as leading candidates. What do you see as the impact of, like, say, if he did nominate Becerra or Padilla, and their connection to the UFW that you mentioned is so against H-2A and certain immigration types, what would that impact be, do you think?
It's a good question, Lupe. I think from a Senate perspective, there wouldn't be much change, because that person would be replacing Kamala Harris in the Senate. Kamala Harris is very close to the UFW, and our leader in the Western U.S. on the Democratic side for immigration in the Senate has been Dianne Feinstein. She's been our champion the entire time, and that has been true even while Kamala Harris was in the Senate. So I don't know that it would change the dynamics in the Senate very much. I do think, you know, everybody likes to take the guess here that as to who the governor will appoint. I do think Alex Padilla has a very strong chance of being appointed to the Senate. He's personally close to Governor Newsom. He was I think the first person to endorse Governor Newsom's run for governor when Newsom ran the first time in 2008 against Jerry Brown. So they're quite close, and Padilla has a strong record in both the legislature as Secretary of State. So I think he probably has the inside track, but I don't have any inside information from the Newsom team. I'm just guessing.
Yeah, and the other question that I had is in relationship to the victory by the gig economy folks at Uber, Lyft, etc. It seems like the California electorate kind of gave our legislature a little feedback on their overreach into labor issues. And if you spend enough money, if you have a couple of $100 million that you can throw out there, I guess you can pass some reasonable initiatives to change how we deal with labor issues. The big thing that we have to deal with here in California, as you're aware, is this 8-hour workday, 40-hour work week that's pending. Would there be any realistic chance of, if farm workers would stand up and say, this really sucks for farm workers. I need to go out and hustle side jobs on the weekends now. This just makes it more complicated and harder for me to raise my family and pay my bills. Do you see any likelihood that ag industry could unite, ag workers, would get behind some kind of an initiative that might overturn AB 1066, or is that train already left the station?
Another really good question. I'll answer it this way. I would be very skeptical that we could do anything to soften the impact of the overtime legislation through an initiative. Initiatives are really tough. As you said, the budget that you have a good shot at winning. These days, you have to be in the tens of millions of dollars minimum. But really, as in that case, they spent, the Uber and Lyft and DoorDash coalition spent, I believe, about $190 million. I mean, really amazing. I don't see the ag industry raising that. But the more important answer to your question, I think, or more precise answer to your question is that I don't foreclose the chance that we could see some softening of the ag overtime law at some point. I don't think we're ripe for that right now. I think the only way that happens is exactly the scenario that you just described. Only if our workforce rises up on its own without being pressured or funded by the ag industry to do it, only if those workers organically organize themselves and present themselves to the legislature and demand a change to that law to help themselves, only then is there a chance. I think if the industry, if people like me and the people I represent, farmers, are going up to Sacramento and arguing to change that law, I think we're wasting our time, unfortunately. But the workers are the ones who've been harmed more than anybody, as you note. You're right about that. We predicted that this would happen when the bill was being debated. We funded an economic study to prove that farmers would make one of three choices or some combination thereof, and one of them is reduce hours. And that's what's happening. And so I'm intent on presenting that indictment to the legislature when we have a good bucket of evidence to prove that our prediction came true, sadly. And when it does come true, and it's coming true now, and we can present that case in a compelling way, we need to hold the legislature accountable. That could then at least prep the ground for a worker-led movement to, if not repeal the law entirely, change it to make it less damaging to workers' paychecks.
Dave, as I mentioned earlier in my comments, it's unfortunate that we can't hear the rounds of applause from everybody and the cheers and the thanks. But be aware that we really appreciate your sharing time with us, giving us your insights. It's an interesting time that we're living in, and I think 2021 will continue to be interesting. Thanks a lot for sharing your insights, and we wish you the best at Western Growers, and thanks for your support of CFLCA. I do remember coming to you early on, explaining what we were trying to do and the support that you provided. We appreciate you and a lot of other people that have helped us get this far.
Thank you, Lupe. It's been a pleasure. It's good to see you again. And to everybody out there in the organization, keep fighting. Don't give up. We can get there.
Thanks a lot,
Thank
Dave.
you.
Take care. Have a
All right.
great
All
day.
right.
You
All right.
too.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Dave. We also want to thank Sean Cohen of Paramount Exclusive Insurance, our platinum sponsor, as well as all of our Ag Labor Forum sponsors. Thank you so much for all of your support throughout. And of course, thank all of you for joining us. I am sorry about all the technical difficulties, but hopefully you were able to catch that. And don't worry, we'll be posting a recording of this as well. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you in the next sessions.
Thanks, Kimberly.